Hello everyone, it's your girl Ego Dram. What is up? How are you? I hope you are doing well. I know videos have been a bit sparse. I moved house recently. This isn't my new studio, but my new studio is not ready to film in yet. So we're just gonna have to make do with the extra room here. Say hello to Sven. Sven is my newest friend. So, not too terribly long ago, I put out a call to friends and followers that since Veterans Day is coming up very soon, hey, I'm an Iraq veteran, what would you like to know? I know I am committing America heresy here when I say that Veterans Day is not necessarily my favorite holiday, and I have a whole bunch of reasons for that. I did not get as many questions as I had initially hoped for. That's completely fine. I will happily answer the ones that I did get, though. I only asked for 2 simple ground rules. The first being, please only ask one question, because it keeps things fair for other viewers who want to ask questions, and it makes for easier editing later. And the other rule was not to post anything you wouldn't want your boss or your spouse or a prosecutor to see, because I am going to be including their names. And I've got some, I'd call it an FAQ session that I just kind of thought up. I'm mostly playing this off the top of my head, unless otherwise cited sources. Before we begin the question and answer portion of the video, I am going to give you a rough overview of the general history of Operation Iraqi Freedom, or as some people have come to call it, the Second Gulf War. In the early morning of the 20th of March 2003, the United States and several allied nations launched an invasion into Iraq under the George W. Bush administration's global war on terror. The justification for the invasion of Iraq was based on dodgy at best intel that was very harshly scrutinized by the media, public figures, and some elements of the government, but were quickly silenced. Within the first few years of the occupation of Iraq, multiple reports began to emerge of atrocities being committed by American forces, including the events of Abu Ghraib and the very suspicious death of Private First Class Lavina Johnson in 2005. While the war did help bring about the collapse of notorious dictator Saddam Hussein, it was later confirmed that the so-called intel used to justify the invasion was not reliable. All combat troops were officially withdrawn from Iraq in 2010, and in 2011, ended. For reference purposes only, I am going to be including a link to the Wikipedia article about Abu Ghraib, but I'm just giving you a heads up, consider it a content warning. They use the photos in the article. They use the photos in the listing. They are nauseating and horrific. I'm just preparing you in case you decide to read up on the incident itself. You're going to see some things you wish you didn't. So a little bit about myself and my military background. I enlisted in 2009 after the housing bubble burst started to get really bad. I had just lost my job, and I was about to lose my apartment, and I figured I didn't have terribly many other choices. Since women weren't allowed in combat roles, according to my recruiter, they told me that my odds of actually deploying were extremely low. Oh, you won't go to war. You're not even eligible for combat. You're signing up for a non-combat MOS. You'll be fine. Not now, Discord Team Garlic Bread. Not a good time. My dumb, desperate ass believing all of this, thinking, right, it's only 4 years, and they told me I could reclass anytime I wanted if I'm not happy. But I didn't see the asterisks at the end of that statement. So I enlisted in summer of 2009. Like, I was that far away from basically being homeless on the street. And apparently a ton of people, after the housing recession started getting really bad, had the same idea I did. My ship out date to basic training was actually delayed by a while because so many people were signing up all at once. I went to basic in Fort Jackson, South Carolina. I went to AIT training at back then known as Fort Gordon, Georgia. I believe they've changed the name. I don't know to what. And after a 6-month AIT and 2 weeks of leave, my big girl unit was the 40th Expeditionary Signal Battalion, Bravo Company, in Fort Huachuca, Arizona, otherwise known as Fort We Gotcha, because there's only 2 ways out of Fort Huachuca, death or DD 214. Also, a lot of Mormons. A lot of Mormons. And not too terribly long, I want to say less than 48 hours after PCSing to my big kid unit, I was handed deployment orders. 40th ESB was one of the last active duty units to deploy under Operation Iraqi Freedom. I begged, pleaded, and cried there must have been some sort of a mistake. I just got here. How is this legal? Like, I haven't even been introduced to everybody yet. And then I had to actually call my husband and explain what was happening. Like, hey, I just got here and they're already handing me deployment orders and they're telling me there's nothing I can do about it. And it kind of sort of started, it didn't quite click into my head that I got fucking lied to. I got lied to, I believed it, and I'm thinking to myself, wait, this isn't a combat job. How am I deploying? This isn't a combat MOS. I'm ineligible for combat. What the hell's going on here? How does this even work? How many asterisks and fine lines of fine print I didn't see in the contract until too late after I'd signed it, is that just because you're not in a combat role doesn't mean that you aren't combat support. And infantry and MPs and special forces still need communication equipment with which to talk to each other. Because that's the thing with the U.S. Army Signal Corps. They can talk about us, but they can't talk without us. Stupid slogans, I know. 40th ESB, we were one of the last units to deploy under Operation Iraqi Freedom. And then as actual combat troops were being withdrawn and there was sort of a die down and cleanup period, called Operation New Dawn. I don't pick these names. I've told my story, my situation on this platform and others about things I saw, things I experienced, witnessed while I was down there. You can go watch those at any time. For now, I would like to get to the questions that y'all asked me. Cole Harden asks, what would you tell a young vet that feels like their service didn't mean anything because they didn't see combat? It might not feel like it, but in a way you lucked out. Not having to be boots on the ground in a depressing and desperate environment like a combat zone, and not having to directly witness or, thank fuck, I didn't directly participate in horrible things. Just because I never squeezed the trigger, and I'm actually quite thankful for that. I'm trying to think of a way that I can phrase this. Don't feel bad about it. Instead, I would ask myself the question, why am I expected to feel propped up for having seen combat or participated in it? I wouldn't beat yourself up over having never seen combat, because compared to somebody who has, you got the better end of that deal, in my opinion. Igbamat asks, did you ever play any of the America's Army video games that were developed by the U.S. Army from 2002 onward as recruitment propaganda? I think I played it for like 5 minutes, and I just could not get the hang of the game. The game mechanics were wonky as shit. The game would not load correctly, not on the console that I was playing it on at the time. I didn't play it for very long. I just could not get it to work. I am also aware that games like Battlefield and Call of Duty are heavily incentivized to sort of make military life look cool, but they tend not to include the bits about really high divorce rate, financial problems, alcoholism, addiction, corruption. They tend to gloss over, the more unpleasant but no less real bits in favor of the bang bang shooty shooty. I've got nothing against these games. If you love first-person shooters, I'm not going to stop you from playing them, and I don't assume that you're a bad person for enjoying them. Just know that you're not immune to propaganda, and it's not as much fun as the games make the life out to be. Violent telegraphy, VT. What's the hardest thing about being a female veteran? You will never be enough. Your PT scores could be damn near perfect or above and beyond, and people will still bitch about the standards not being the same. Even though you didn't set those standards, you might have exceeded them. You might have exceeded them, but the standards still aren't the same, and that's somehow your fault. It doesn't matter how good your shot group is or how well you do at the range. You know, you still have an unfair advantage somehow. You might get tacked onto a detail, which is like an extra job. A detail is a term meaning like an extra side job. It'll usually be something, it'll be anything from you're going with this group to go pick up trash on this side of the base or to go help clean something up for a certain amount of time. You could be assigned to a really nice little detail, like to go to another part of a base and do what might be seen as a cushier version of your job in a nice air-conditioned office with working toilets and drinkable water. Yeah, it's pretty sad that that's considered cushy on American military bases. You could get that sweetheart detail and they will still accuse you of, you know, being somebody's favorite or f***ing your way into that position. Or any position, really. It doesn't even have to be a detail. Not only will you never be good enough on your own merit, no matter how hard you try, everything is your fault. You will only ever be seen as a burden or like a DEI hire, and there's not a goddamn thing you can do about it. You can meet and exceed the standards. You can do everything else right, and you're still not enough. When I was still while I was on my way out, I talked to multiple women in my unit and in other units within 40th ESB. There's just like, yeah, it's like nothing we do is enough. And it's like we don't exist until something goes wrong. The hardest thing about being a female soldier, other than the rampant assault and harassment, is that your best will never be enough. So I know, like I said earlier, I said, please only ask one question. This next person, I'm going to cut them a little bit of slack because they're a long-term mutual of mine. The Scene Queen asked, what is the biggest part of your service and experience that you wish civvies or people with no military background or experience understood more about, or at all, as the case may be? Is there anybody we don't know or really think of that may change how we perceive the armed forces, veterans, and service in this country? Is there anything we get so totally wrong that you wish we would educate ourselves on? Oh, just saw the rest of the caption about one question. It's no problem. I've had my ADHD moments. I totally get it. So, biggest part of the service that you wish civvies or people would understand. Life on a military base, either at home or overseas, is a completely different world than movies and video games and TV will ever show you. It is an insular society of sorts. There are entire slang terms and weird little subcultures that would not make sense to someone who either was not there or was not even in proximity to it. Terms like E4 Mafia, Milso, Dependa, Pog. These words these words come with ideas and connotations that don't necessarily translate very well into the civilian sector. There is a whole lot of shit that goes on the other side of that really flimsy concertina wire fence. There's a whole world that people don't see, that the American public doesn't see. Military bases are not necessarily going to be concrete buildings with soldiers marching around holding very large guns all the time. Like Bill Murray's Stripes, that doesn't happen anymore. Military bases are kind of like their own walled off mini towns. They have their own small shopping centers. They have their own grocery stores called commissaries. They have barracks buildings. They have a tax preparation office. Military bases, at least most of the ones that I've been to, they have pretty much everything that a small town might have, only it looks like it was built to survive a nuclear blast, because a lot of them probably were. There's a lot that goes on in these insular communities and subcultures and such that when I say they don't want people to see that, I understand that I'm not going into like a conspiracy theory or anything like that. There's a lot that happens that the general public might not have a very good understanding of, but in my opinion, they still should. Is there anybody we don't know, really think of, that may change how we perceive the armed forces? There is a book called Sacred Soldier by Robert F. Keeler. He goes into a lot of very thorough detail about explaining why this cult of hero worship, this post 9/11 cult of hero worship, is actually harmful to our armed forces and harmful to society in general. It creates a overly permissive environment for bad actors to do even worse things, either to fellow troops or unarmed civilians, boots on the ground. He also goes into detail explaining how video games and movies are not only used as propaganda, but also very tightly controlled by the Department of Defense in terms of, we can't stop you from making this movie about Tailhook and casting Sigourney Weaver as the therapist. We can't stop you from doing that, but we're also not going to give you permission to film on a decommissioned aircraft carrier so which you can actually film it. Yeah, that's what I thought. Peasant, shut your mouth. So yeah, if you want to know about somebody that might change how anyone, right, left, center, up, down, how they look at military life, Robert F. Keeler's book is a very good place to start. Is there anything we get so totally wrong that you wish we would educate ourselves on? Economic conscription is a real thing. I really wish that more people understood what it takes in someone's mind and just how badly things have to go in order to bring an otherwise rational person to get to that point. It is well documented and well researched that in times of economic trouble and turmoil, people join the military in greater numbers. The 2008 recession being the most recent example of this. When I was in basic and AIT, there were so many new people joining up who had lost their jobs and their homes and whatnot, and people of all ages, not necessarily snot-nosed 19-year-olds joining right out of high school. I served alongside people in their 30s with families and kids and people who had jobs. Like, I served alongside a guy who said his only reason for joining is because his wife was battling cancer and he had just lost his civilian job. And the only thing he could think to do, his absolute last-ditch effort to save her life, was to join and stay in long enough to be eligible for TRICARE, which is the military's free healthcare system. The line, "Why do they always send the poor?" exists in the song for a reason. This is not new. This is what happens. The Department of Defense did put out a statement saying the reason they don't want universal healthcare in the United States is because if they do implement universal healthcare, nobody will join. More people need to educate themselves on the poverty to private first class pipeline. I don't know what else to call it. I've heard it referred to as economic conscription or the poverty draft. Whether or not you like or understand it, it is a real thing. In 2009, so many people were joining up all at once, like of all ages and all backgrounds. If you were eligible to join and you did, they couldn't put up new barracks fast enough. They were putting up these giant-ass temporary warehouses, shoving these cheap-ass bunk beds into them and saying, here's where you can stay until we actually have a spot to put you for basic training, because that takes 9 weeks. And all the programs are full. Just go in the warehouse and wait, because there were that many people all signing up at once. That's not all of a sudden people decided to shoot babies for money because we just as a society collectively decided to become greedy sociopaths. That is how bad things got that people thought, well, the wars are drawing down, so what are the odds? And then my dumbass lost at those odds. And I can't find a screenshot on my tablet, but somebody did ask about an energy drink called a Ripit. Yes, I had a Ripit when I was downrange. I don't really, aside from Red Bull, I don't really care for energy drinks all that much in general. Yes, I did have one. Yes, everybody was obsessed with them. I had one, I didn't care for it. Unseasoned seltzer water and Kool-Aid in a can. So to touch on some other things I said earlier in the video, Veterans Day isn't necessarily my favorite holiday. And I have a multitude of reasons for thinking and feeling this way. It's just the whole thank you for your service sentiment really didn't exist prior to 9/11. That wasn't really a thing. Letting active duty troops and veterans on the plane first, and rounds of applause, like support our troops, yellow ribbons, stickers on cars. That was not a thing before 9/11. I grew up in a military family. My grandfather fought in World War II. My father's a Marine. I'm the first and only woman in my family to serve in the military. I come from a long-standing military family. That was not a thing growing up in the 80s and 90s. We didn't have any of that. And now 20-something years after GWAT began, we have an entire generation of young people who were raised in that environment where they are expected to either stand behind our troops or stand in front of them. I hate that. I really do. They've only ever known a world where that undying allegiance was demanded of them. Meanwhile, I bet a sizable portion of them were raised by veterans who were sent to Iraq and Afghanistan, came home fucked up, and that would be totally understandable. That would be a totally understandable reason to sour a taste in their mouths about what military life is actually like, and is probably why a lot of them don't want to join anymore. And I don't blame them at all. So while a lot of us had our suspicions that the Bush administration wasn't telling the whole truth about Iraq, and which was much later revealed to be the case, like, yeah, he fudged a whole bunch of shit. We couldn't talk about it as quickly and easily as we could have, like, if it were still happening now, like what we're seeing happening in Sudan and Pakistan. Everything is filtered and controlled now, even though we can share it and spread it a hell of a lot faster than we could between 2003 to 2011. And yet there are so many odd parallels between then and now happening as far as internet information control and censorship is concerned. I think that more people need to read Robert F. Keeler's book. I also think more people need to read Paul Rieckhoff's book, Chasing Ghosts, to get a better understanding of actually being there in the early days of OIF and a lot of people's thought processes going in their heads around the time. I don't blame them for not being so interested in military matters anymore. The phrase, thank you for your service, has, it felt great while I was still in, people buying me free coffee at the airport. Hey, it was nice. Free coffee, awesome. But the more I think about it, is just hearing people say it makes me feel a little bit of a twinge of cringe, if you will. Part of that is I'm reminded that someone has also said this phrase to the soldier that assaulted me downrange and to all of the people that covered for him. But I think they've become skeptical of the thank you for your service patriotism, hyper-patriotism flavored Kool-Aid. And I think that they're right to be skeptical of that. And I think that they're right to be very wary of 20 years of support the troops or go for yourself propaganda that they were raised under. I don't think it's a bad thing that they're raising their hands, asking questions, and necessarily outright rejecting it. I'm stating an observation here. What I am noticing among people under 30 is this really staunch, very noticeable separation and polarization between right and left. There are a lot of people out there that will make assumptions that veterans, especially GWAT veterans like myself, that we are all of one mind and one heart and one reason for having served our country, for good or ill, America no matter what, and that couldn't be further from the case. I've met veterans who are very staunch Christian nationalists. They wholeheartedly believe that this country's laws should only be decided by their interpretation of the Bible, their interpretation of the Bible, and that there shouldn't be anything. Some Gilead type shit. It sank my stomach when I heard a soldier say with their entire face that killing Iraqis isn't a sin because they're not Christians. There are Christians in Iraq. And second, how the hell did you make it past MEPS? There are also a lot of leftist. Like I don't mean DNC Democrats. I mean actual leftist veterans. There is no such thing as a radical leftist Democrat, by the way. Radical leftist Democrats, I bet they eat eggless omelets and kosher ham sandwiches with cheese. Okay, yeah, those totally fucking exist. No, they don't. There are actual veterans out there who are socialists and communists. I have met and spoken to several. They openly denounce and decry what they perceive to be the war machine, the worst aspects of the military-industrial complex, the predatory recruiting practices. They are more than happy to discuss their opinions, observations, reading theory, this, that, and the other, with people who are willing to listen to them in good faith conversation. A lot of people, right, left, center, everywhere, make a sort of blanket assumption that veterans are inherently patriotic and that we all unconditionally support this country and everything it does. And I think that that's very damaging when you have people on the right who are eager to stand on our already f***ed up backs that we're not rated anywhere near high enough as an excuse to shit on minorities, on immigrants, on the LGBT community. And that's not right, because there are minority and immigrant and LGBT veterans out there that you are citing the veterans and their sacrifice, to, condemn the very same people you're supporting. Like the troops didn't fight for this transgender shit. It was like, I know more transgender veterans than I do civilians. I was in the Army under Don't Ask, Don't Tell. I had more LGBT friends in the Army. I had more LGBT friends downrange than I currently do as a civilian. And by the way, when DADT existed and when it was eventually repealed, nobody cared. Nobody worth a damn gave a damn. Like, why do the gays get a whole month? Veterans get a whole month too. Veterans get 2 whole months. We get 2 entire months. We get several days aside from those months. Hey, one of those days being today. This is common knowledge. Google is free. If they actually cared about the troops who sacrificed so much, they would know this already. They'd stop, but they don't care. They see us as easy patriot points to score on social media. I hate that shit. And I also can't stand, oh, you're just a baby killer thing. Okay, we've already talked about the poverty draft and economic conscription, and that it is in fact a thing. If you would bother to actually look for the information, you will see it, you will find it, the evidence is there. Just talk to the actual veterans who did join because it was their only way out of homelessness. There probably was no network of mutual aid in or anywhere near their trailer park, inner city, or res. Okay? I love the idea of mutual aid and I am happy to support it, but it's not a thing that exists in a lot of rural and impoverished communities. Because trust fund tankies don't actually give a shit about the working poor. They just like to stand on the backs of dead people. overseas with which to preach about working class issues while looking down their nose at working class people. You want to talk about systemic poverty being a disease while punching a specific group of patients in the face? That's not very revolutionary of you. That is just bullshit praxis, man. What are you doing? Motherfuckers make communist the new vegan. And the thing is that I often get this argument from some of the least class-conscious people you will ever meet in your entire life. I will never forget the day someone posted this. Like, okay, so not only is this an incredibly shitty thing to say to an MST survivor, but in that comment thread, which is mysteriously missing for some strange reason, they later admitted that they don't need to think about, issues, like all someone had to do is be more responsible with their money, set up better investments like I did. I'm a landlord. With his name in his username and location, admits I'm sorry, I am not taking a lecture about ethics under capitalism from a fucking landlord. Oh god. Okay, I spent too long on this makeup to just start ruining it with laughter tears, but dude. Oh my god. I am not a communist, but Mao had one good idea when it comes to landlords. It does not get more fucking oblivious than a landlord telling the working class that the choices they're making are wrong and harmful and that they're a burden and a detriment to society and totally not victims. Yeah, okay, Val. Okay. Get an entire ass job, you parasite. And as far as whether or not, how do you feel about being complicit in war crimes? You think I don't think about that shit? Do you have so little faith in your fellow human beings that you just can't imagine that people do think about their actions and reflect on them from time to time? You think I don't wonder if a phone that I helped configure to DoD specs, or a router or a computer that I cleaned, that I wiped, and then reinstalled the DoD spec operating system, you think I don't think about whether or not I will have any way of knowing if that phone was used to call in a drone strike? I don't know. I don't know. I will have no way of knowing. You think that doesn't bother me? Really? Do you have such a low opinion of your fellow humans that every poor person who signs up due to lack of better options, real or perceived, just automatically decides to literally sell their soul, become a sociopath, and gets giddy at the thought of pulling a trigger? Because if your opinion of humanity is so low that you think that that's actually a thing, that sounds like a pathetic way to live. It really does. I can see how it would be so easy to find a platform of human flesh, bone, and blood from which to stand with a red book in your hand and point your finger down at everyone else whose lives and backgrounds you don't understand because you were never in their position in the first place. A fucking landlord. But no, the manifesto, I've read it. I've read theory. I've read On Authority. I've read Marx. I've read Engels. I've read Che Guevara. I have not yet read Mao. You do understand theory is not a religion. You know that, right? It's important to this whole conversation that you know that and understand that. You cannot honestly expect any meaningful change to happen in terms of stopping the military-industrial complex if you refuse to acknowledge the very real existence of its biggest gears. I mean, that's the same line of thinking that SWERFs use. It's the same line of thinking militant vegans use. You don't have to like my honest answers to these questions or these concerns, but I've given you the means through which to look into them on your own. Not just consume the information, but really think on it. And if you don't want to bother doing that, well, that's on you. I can't make you do anything you don't want to do. But know this, If I do owe recompense to anybody for real or perceived war crimes, direct or indirect, I would rather hear that from the Iraqi people themselves than some trust fund tanky in a punk with a camera t-shirt. Okay? Thank you for sticking with me this far into the video. I know that was a lot to absorb, but I don't have a very big audience, but I do appreciate the audience that I do have. Be good to each other. No matter how bad your situation gets, look for more options before you walk into that recruiter's office.